What's up, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of what I think we're going to call the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. I am super excited about this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for us to get together. If you guys don't know who we are, my name is Billy Barton, and I've got Brennan and Nick with us as well. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a second. But basically, guys, we're just some normal guys that like to shoot stuff and get better and train and help other people get better. That's the short version of it. So that's kind of what this podcast is all going to be about. It's going to be us getting together and discussing shooting stuff for the most part, and trying to put out some good education and tips for folks. And I'm really excited about it. I'm being a little pretentious. I care a little bit about you guys that are watching and helping you guys out, but also I'm excited for me to hopefully learn some things from these guys that I got with me on here, and to kind of test my ideas and see where we agree on things, and maybe have some different perspectives on things, and hopefully all of us can grow together. It'd be really cool. So, guys, I guess really quickly for folks that may not know who we are, let's just go around the room really quick. I guess, Brennan, we want to start with you and just kind of give us your quick elevator pitch, who you are, what you're up to, what you do, and we'll just go around really quick.
Sure. So my name is Brennan Brennecke. Been shooting and training for a few years now. Most lately was teaching actually for Billy and previously Chris Urudia over at SpecTrain. So was teaching for them for about a year. And now I am teaching for Vortex. Vortex Optics has a training division called Vortex Edge, and so I'm one of the Edge instructors. There's 6 of us. We're running classes, everything from pistol to carbine to night vision, home defense, CQB, a bunch of different classes, and that's up in Barnveld, Wisconsin. So that's where I'm at, and just kind of living the dream.
That's cool, man. Yeah, Nick. Brennan has. I don't know what his deal is. Brennan's been shooting out of the three of us. Brennan, you've been shooting the least amount of time, and yet you're the only one that's actually doing this stuff full time so far. So somehow you've leaped. No, but no. Vortex is just determined to steal all my best talent. But I promise I'm not mad about it. It's fine. I'm looking forward to getting out and spending some more time with you guys up in Wisconsin. And next we have Mr. Nick Young, Velox Training Group. Tell us about yourself a little bit, Nick.
Yeah, my name is Nick Young. I own Velox Training Group. I've been shooting for pretty much all of my life. When we moved down here to North Carolina, I started getting pretty serious into it because where we live, like basically right next to Fort Bragg, is like it is like the shooting mecca, man. Everyone shoots. You can pretty much hit, probably 2 matches a weekend if you wanted to. And so really started getting into it. I started getting into it because I wanted to kind of like, just like everyone else always says, right? I wanted guns to help protect, myself, my family, the whole nine. Started off doing a bunch of like self-defense type classes. Fast forward a little bit, I had a buddy who was like heavy into 3-gun, and he was always trying to get me to shoot 3-gun matches. And I was always like, no way, man. Like that stuff will get you killed in the streets. Like it has nothing to do with
No
whatever I
way.
want to go do.
Really? That's
And
great.
and so finally I was like, fine, I will go with you, and I will absolutely, smoke everyone. Um, and so I went, right. And it's important to remember that I did not smoke everyone because I'm super competitive and I don't like the way that makes me feel when I lose. And so
Yeah.
I came like middle of the pack, but I was super amazed at what I saw those guys do as far as the speed and accuracy goes, and it kind of opened up a whole new world for me as far as shooting went. So I shot 3-gun for 2 to 3 years. Moved on from that and did a bunch of PRS stuff, long range stuff. Shooting 6.5 Creedmoors out to 1,000 yards type deal. That gets expensive very, very fast. I would highly recommend it if you can afford it. PRS stuff. There's a lot of stuff in long range shooting that I feel like transfers over to carbines and pistol. And you gain a ton of knowledge doing that stuff. So if you can afford it, I would dabble in it. It's a lot of fun too. So from there, did a little bit of steel challenge, and then most recently started shooting USPSA. 7 matches in the USPSA, I made M class, and right now I'm sitting at like 91%. I literally need like one more good classifier to make GM, but I have a ton of fun with it. But I tell you guys that to say, like, I still carry a gun for the same exact reasons that I started off. And,
Yep.
shooting matches and stuff is only going to help you better protect yourself. I promise it will not get you killed in the streets.
Yeah.
So a lot of my classes are based off of fast accuracy type stuff. How do we go fast, and how do we hit stuff while going fast? Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm not interested in going slow. So, and I'm not interested in missing either.
Right. Yeah.
So
Both
that's me.
both can be important. Both can be important. That's
Yeah.
so funny. I had not heard that story from you yet about kind of your initial impressions about competition, but that's great. That's so great. Yeah, very very cool stuff. So, I guess quick pitch on me. I'm kind of like Nick. I've been shooting my whole life. Grew up in a kind of a military household. Plinking at cans and stuff when I was a kid, and fell in love in shooting from an early age. And really as I got around to that kind of age where things were, I started switching my attentions more to the Second Amendment, self defense, and concealed carry and that kind of stuff. And I was one of those guys that found the Magpul videos and consumed those like over and over again as a kid, and was like, oh, so like training is a thing, and like there's people out there that can teach you stuff, you know, um, and so started pursuing, trying to find that kind of stuff in my area. And I lived at Southwest Virginia at the time, and literally could not find like an instructor within like 5 hours of where I was that wasn't like NRA basic pistol type stuff. And so I ended up driving a very long way from me at the time up towards Washington D.C. and taking my first class with John Murphy, FAF training, who's still a solid dude. But yeah, it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Learned a lot. Just fell in love with training. Kind of became a training junkie and started taking classes everywhere that I could and learning from as many people as I could. And but there was no one else in my area that was doing really anything, of quality, and there was no ranges that hosted people. That's a lot more popular now, but there was no ranges in my area that were bringing in outside instructors and so forth. So everyone that I knew, I started shooting a little bit of IDPA back in the day. That was the only thing that was around, and some people started asking me to teach stuff, so I started teaching classes and helping people that I knew, and so on and so forth. Fell in love with it. And when I came down here to Charlotte, joined up with SpecTrain, and I've been kind of there ever since. My story with USPSA, guys, I know that's going to be kind of probably something we talk about a lot, was I straight up lost people to shoot with that were better than me. Right, like that was the thing. And to me, that's a big thing for getting better is shooting with people that are better than you and being able to learn from those guys and see what they're doing. And it can be super eye-opening. Sometimes just realizing what's possible can like just open your opportunity to get better, right? When you are whether you're on a law enforcement team or just you're shooting with your circle of buddies or whatever, if you're that guy that's dry firing every day, like you're probably the best shooter that you know, right? And if that's all you see, and all you see is, man, I'm the best shooter on my team or in my squad or whatever, all of a sudden you can start thinking, man, I'm about as good as I can get, like realistically, right? Like there's just nowhere to go from here. And if you think that, like you're right, there's nowhere for you to go, because you lose that ability to really push and stuff. And so, and actually, Scott Jedlinski kind of told me that when I took his course. He's like, man, you got to find places. You shoot with anybody that's better than you, and I'm like, no. He's like, you should go start shooting USPSA, and so that's what I did. And I went and shot a couple exploratory matches. Realized I didn't even have a gun that was like legal and stuff, and ended up taking a year off. And I came back, and kind of like you, I made master in under 6 months. in February of 2020, right when COVID hit, and all the matches shut down and so forth. So came back and actually got a match bump up to GM back at the last area match, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I have a real passion for that these days, and that's something I spend a lot of time working on and helping people with kind of competition specific stuff. So anyway, guys, these guys are not going to brag on themselves. I asked Brennan and I asked Nick to be a part of this, not only because they're good guys and they're instructors and trainers and kind of work in this industry, but because these guys are real students of the game, and we all kind of eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So I'm really excited for some of the conversations we're going to have, and hopefully we can all learn some stuff together, and hopefully it's helpful for you guys, and we're going to have a good time at any rate, for sure. But
sure.
so I thought what we'd do for this first episode is kind of the title discussion for folks that may not have caught up yet or kind of understand where we're going. Like I said, we're going to call this the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. Obviously, that's kind of play on words with the classic thing we've all been told by some guy at a match or your uncle on the shooting range, or maybe even an instructor, is man, you just need to slow down and get your hits. Right? That's the thing that we always say, and I know for some of us in the group, that's like that just rubs us the wrong way, right? Every single time, for a
I
lot
believe
of
the word is
reasons.
triggered.
Yes, it's extremely triggering, no no doubt about it. But anyway, I'll hold mine. I thought we'd just kind of have a group discussion about speed versus accuracy, and why we don't like hearing "slow down and get your hits," and why those things are not necessarily related. Who has thoughts that would like to
Oh
kick us
man.
off? I see Nick
I
chomping at the bit over there.
Yeah, I have lots.
Yeah,
So so let's start off with speed, right?
yeah,
Um, a lot of people that particular say like slow down and get your hits, right? My question always is like, well, then how do you get fast?
yeah.
If we're so concerned about hitting all the time, right?
Hmm.
And like you said, accuracy and speed live in totally different worlds. I would 100% agree with that. Like if we never figure out and we never feel what is actually fast, how do
Yeah,
we ever learn how to go fast? Like
yeah.
if I want to be an F1 race car driver, do I only drive 35 and then speed magically appears out of thin air and then I can race
Hmm.
around a track? Like no, man, I have to explore speed. And exploring speed is just as important as exploring accuracy.
Yeah.
And I think that people are so scared to miss sometimes. And I
Yep.
see it in classes where I have a whole section where I will push people on speed of the draw, right?
Yeah.
I legit have never had someone not get a sub-second draw within, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes of dry fire work.
Right.
Um, and there's always one or two that are like, dude, I kid you not, they'll get like a .7 draw the first time ever in their life, and they're like,
Hmm.
but it's a Charlie. And I'm like, dude, you just did something faster than you've ever done. Like,
Yeah.
celebrate that, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we know how to hit. And if you
Yeah.
don't, we can work on that too, but you have to figure out what speed feels like.
Yep.
And if you start to figure that stuff out, it's almost like, and I think you guys would agree with this too, when you explore speed for a while, that feeling becomes pretty damn normal.
Right.
And so the hardest thing for me lately is to actually slow down so I can demo because I feel like I'm going slow and people are like, I can't see what you're doing.
Hmm.
So I have to slow down.
Right.
But it's just, it's a normal feeling for me now. I feel like I've explored speed so much that I don't know, man, I can operate pretty comfortably at that higher level of speed
Yeah.
and be accurate.
I love Mark saying, right, you don't have to go fast when you are fast, right? Like that.
Oh man, I wish I made that up. That was
Yeah.
such a good saying.
Same. There's so many sayings like that. I'm like, dang it. But yeah, that really says it, right? And yeah, I agree with so much of everything you just said. Brennan will tell you he's been in my performance class. There's a particular drill that I typically pull out a bunch of like really shot up targets for people to shoot at, just because like specifically I want them to do the thing and not worry about it so much, you know.
Mhm.
And like you're right, some people really have troubles breaking away from it. But I think the biggest thing to me is when people say slow down and get your hits. So it's like, is it possible to slow down and still miss stuff?
Yeah.
Like obviously, right? So speed, realistically, it's pretty simple. What's required to get a hit? Your sights have to be on target, and you got to pull the trigger without moving the gun, right? If you do those two things, you're going to hit stuff. So if you're missing, it's because you didn't do one of those two things. Regardless of how fast you did it wrong, you did something wrong, right? And so if all we tell people to do is slow down, we're not fixing a problem.
Yeah.
And
They're not telling people what to do. They're not giving people. Can we cuss on this?
Sure.
Okay, they're not fucking telling people what, like, the good information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Slow down and get your, like, think about it like if you were a beginner
Yeah.
and you missed and someone said, well, slow down and get your hits, and you're like, okay, so I slow down and I still miss. What now?
Mm-hmm.
I pack up and leave and go to another instructor.
That's right. That's what you should do.
Like,
That's what you should do. Now, guess what? A lot of times when people slow down, they start hitting stuff. Right? Like that does happen, right? But like we were saying, the problem is, okay, well, if I need to slow down, like how much do I need to slow down? There's no answer for that. So a better version of slow down would be be more careful. Like
yeah,
that would at least be like close to providing something that's helpful.
it's a lot more
'Cause it's
descriptive
it's
term.
it's not just slowing down. But what I like to say is this: there's for every shot, there's a minimum required formula to be successful. How good of a sight confirmation do I need? What kind of trigger pull do I need? Obviously, I'm going to treat my trigger different on an open target at 7 yards than I am at 100 yards. So we have to define what that is and understand which is appropriate. So if I'm shooting a 7-yard open target or a 100-yard open target, there's a formula. I need a certain kind of sight confirmation. I need a certain kind of trigger pull. That's required. Whatever that formula is, I always want to execute that as quickly as possible. Like there's no reason to execute that formula slower than you have to, right? So that's what it is. It's not slow down to get better hits. It's do what you have to do to get your hits as fast as you can. Like that's the way I look at it anyway. But
I love that. I
yeah.
love that. That
Yeah.
was well put.
Brennan, don't let us just steal the
Yeah,
whole show here.
so I think one of the coolest things about USPSA specifically, and I guess I didn't mention it in my intro. Yeah, I also shoot USPSA. All right, so there it is. So so one of the coolest things about USPSA, I think, is hit factor scoring. So
Yes.
for somebody who's tuning in, maybe who doesn't know what hit factor scoring is, it's simply the points that you shot divided by the time that you did it in. Okay, points divided by time. So a lot of what we like to start out people shooting, at least start our classes of Vortex Edge, right? We start them out just shooting on a basic B8, and we're just trying to make sure that they can actually hit things, right? Make sure that they can pull the trigger without disturbing the sights.
Sure.
So we usually give them like a 5-shot or 10-shot group, and we can score that out of 50 or 100, right? And so once we get people shooting straight, we start talking about, okay, like now you can do that. We know that you can do that, and you've identified what your sights need to look like all the way through your trigger press, right? I like Tim Herron says it really well. He says, rather than talking about like a sight picture, it's more like a sight movie, right? It's a continuous thing that's going on. It's not just something that happens at one instant and then we have to time something up with that instant. It's something that is continuous. I thought that was well put. But when we can get people to figure that out, then it's time to start measuring how quickly they did it. And most of the beginners that come through our classes have never heard of hit factor scoring, but it makes a lot of sense. And so that you get people of varying skill levels. Maybe you have some younger guy, in his 20s, he's pretty athletic, and then you have kind of an older guy, and maybe he has a bad knee. Right. And so we actually had that in a class this past week. So we introduced him to hit factor scoring and was like, hey, this guy can run these 15 yards pretty dang quickly. Right. And this other guy can't run nearly as quickly, but he's shooting more accurately and he's being more efficient about doing things as soon as he can. So he's
Yeah.
mounting the rifle and he's firing as soon as its dot is there, and he's shooting alphas. And he left his position as soon as he was done shooting his last shot, and had a pretty efficient entry and got the gun up and started shooting right away when he could again. And we were seeing super competitive times because we were able to kind of break down that hit factor scoring for different people. And so I believe it's Matt Pronka was the one who first started saying this, but it was like, you can't have just, if you choose just speed or just accuracy one over the other, your opponent is going to take the other one, whatever you leave on the table.
Yeah.
Right. So whether that's the bad guy or whether that's a competitor, right?
Right.
The other one, they're going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think shooting really, I think for everybody who is maybe at that point in shooting where they're maybe getting tired of shooting bullseyes and they're maybe wondering what's next, I think what we all found in competition was, oh crap, there's all of these things that high level shooters do, but they do it at such a fast pace. There's a lot that we can figure out about shooting, and I think that's what maybe got me really addicted to USPSA was like none of the accuracy, none of the marksmanship standards in USPSA were particularly challenging, especially after coming off of shooting 25-yard B8s a lot.
Yeah.
They were actually really not challenging at all. But what was challenging was, shoot, how can I hit this big 6x11 A zone a lot faster?
Right.
And so, yeah, that's one of the main reasons that I compete in USPSA, why I got into it, why I'm still in it, because I know there's a lot more to, pick up from that.
Really good stuff. Yeah, and I love Matt's got a lot of good things he's put out. One of his sayings was just simply that he put out a while back. I thought was really well put. He just said, "Hey, speed and accuracy should not be competing efforts."
Yeah.
And that's a complete mind twister for so many people. You go to your average USPSA match and you talk about people, how do I need to get better at USPSA, and they're talking about, well, you got to figure out how to balance speed and accuracy. And it's always like, it's like a video game, when you set up your character for the first time, it's like you have 10 skill points, and I can add to power, but it takes away from speed every time, or whatever. And it's like, that's not how it works, right? It's very simply like, hey, here's the accuracy requirement for the shooting challenge. Is it a piece of steel at 25? Is it a USPSA A zone at 7? Whatever the target variable is it a partial? Is it a headshot? Is it a swinger? Here's the required accuracy. Now, how do I figure out how to meet that standard as quickly as possible? That's what it is. It's not competing efforts. It's meeting the standard as fast as you possibly can. And so it's a whole different way. But I love what you brought up as well, Brennan, about the efficiency versus speed, because actually I'm not sure, maybe you talked to Joe about this, Nick. I know you spent some time with Joe Farewell. I got to meet him at ORD this year. One of the things we both talked about was learning a lot when we had leg injuries. Joe blew out his knee. I blew out my ankle a little bit over a year and a half ago, I guess now, and I'm not sure if I had just made masterclass in USPSA or was just about there. It was right about that time. And I specifically remember it was like 2 weeks after that, I went and shot. I was like, man, I got to go shoot something. I just couldn't sit in the house anymore. And I couldn't bend my ankle at all. I could walk on it like it was a peg leg, and I couldn't run. I couldn't put any extra weight on that foot. I could just kind of hobble. But I remember going and shooting my first match and just shooting one of the best matches in USPSA I'd ever shot. And just like, not only winning carry optics, but like smoking the open guys and the whole deal. And I was like, what just happened? Like, how is that even possible? We're supposed to be running around like, chickens with our head cut off in this sport, right? To be able to be successful. But it was just like, man, when you're not worried about running 100 miles an hour, it's super easy to come into your position with your gun up already, and it's easy to move through positions and stuff like that, and not miss so much and all that kind of stuff, and so yeah, it really is crazy sometimes, how efficiency rules. I had this exact same conversation with my students on Saturday because we do our final core drill in our pistol core class, which is just running through some different positions and shooting some targets and so forth. And, in this particular case, my time was ended up being like half of the winning student time. And everyone's like, oh, well, you just shot that so fast. I'm like, no, not really. And I showed them on a timer. I'm like, my splits were like the same as yours, basically. You know, it was like it was everything in between the noisy parts that really
Yes.
that makes the difference sometimes. You know, and so learning how to do some of that efficiently. You know, I'm not the most athletic guy in the world. I'm not some, you know, great sprinter or whatever. But you know, if you can come into your position efficiently with your gun up already, and you can get out of there as soon as that last shot leaves the barrel, it's amazing the kind of difference it can make sometimes. You know.
Yeah, 100%, man. Freaking dude, if you can shoot pretty accurately,
Yeah.
figure movement out and transition well, you don't need to go do things like jumping jacks in the park to shoot well at USPSA. You just
So
don't.
yeah, it's so true, man. I tell people all the time, like, you know, look at the Rob Lathams and the, you know, Terran Tacticals of the world and so forth. It's like, man, those guys aren't winning nationals because they run faster than everybody else. Like that's just not what it is.
Mm-mm,
Now,
mm-mm.
now don't get me wrong. If you can do everything else really well and run fast, like, hey, that could be something. You know, that's why we're seeing, you know, the Max Michels and the JJ Ricazas and the guys who are at the top of the sport right now that are becoming those, you know, shooter athletes that that they are in, because they're trying to milk every last percent, you know, out of what they can put into it, whether it's shooting or otherwise. But the bottom line is that the traverse portion of that movement is kind of the of minimal importance compared to the rest of it, which
Well,
is
and I think
Absolutely.
there's a big difference too between I don't know about you guys. I've kind of seen this. I don't know what to call it. A trend, a movement
yeah,
of this hyper isolation of
hmm
every single skill that you might have to use in shooting,
hmm
and and almost a fear maybe or a reluctance to blend the two and or three or four and figure out what we need to do as far as blending them. I think
yeah,
speed versus accuracy is one of those. I think you know, I would say like technique versus just raw hand speed or raw foot speed
hmm
would be another one, right? Like if you guys are both trained with JJ Ricazza, right? You're familiar with his 3-step entry, right?
yeah,
You guys saw, we've all seen on a timer, right? There's a lot of benefits to entering a position a certain way, exiting a position a certain way. It is quicker. We end up doing the next thing sooner. I think a lot of people take that too far sometimes and they want to just talk about hey man, you got to be really athletic, you got to learn how to run really fast like this, you got to make sure you're never training with, you know, never train movement with a gun in your hand, never train speed with a target in front of you, never
yeah,
train accuracy with any sort of time standard,
yeah,
right? And I think that's dividing it up too much. I think that's dividing it up too much. I think that you can train speed with a target in front of you. You know,
hmm
I think you can train accuracy with some sort of time standard that
yeah,
allows you to, you know, pay attention to the level that you need to for your skill level. And I
mm,
think that you can figure out these efficient movement techniques before you add that raw athleticism. I see this with teaching the draw a lot.
yeah,
Um, you know, I'll get guys who are maybe really over eager and they're just attacking the gun. And I'm like, hey, man, that's awesome, but you're grabbing the gun a different way every time. So,
yeah,
what I want you to do is I want you
Too
to
much.
exactly. So, I want you to go at a speed where you can form the grip exactly like we talked about.
yeah,
So, I want you to be able to go at a speed where you can do every single step perfectly. And a byproduct of that is he slows down, right? He figures that out. Okay, man, when you got your gun up to your eye, how was your grip? He was like, yeah, it was pretty much perfect, man. I was like, all right, awesome. Let's make that repeatable, and then let's add that hand speed back in,
yeah,
and let's see where we're at. You know,
yeah,
and so I think that's something that we can blend, and it's not always something that has to just be completely separate.
yeah, 100%. I think we all, I think I've seen draw instruction demos from all of us, and I think we all do the thing. You know, at some point, there's just like, okay, let's cut this back to like 50% hand speed and still get like a point 0.9, and you just see people's heads explode, right? They're like,
Yep.
what? Because everyone just wants to go, oh, well, that's just because that guy has, you know, insane hand speed, or oh, that's just because you have a gifted trigger finger. Like I can't tell you how much I hear that, right? And it's like, nah, man, that's not that's not really what it's about. Brennan just brought up so much good stuff, man. I think maybe I almost dove into like modes of training with that. Maybe that'll be a good subject for a future podcast. I don't want to
Yeah, certainly.
get into that one too deep right now. But
On the movement thing, man, I think when people really try to isolate that stuff, like, hey, we need to isolate the way we move like this so I can run
mm-hmm.
faster, on a stage, I think they're really, in my opinion, I think that they're missing the whole point of how you would move on a stage,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that really came to light for me the last JJ class I took. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, what we're moving because we're trying to blend positions together so we can shoot targets sooner. We're
Yeah.
not moving to like haul ass to get to a spot. Like
We're actually trying
there's so
to
much
avoid that
more than that.
specifically.
Yes, yes.
If you're ever having to run really fast, that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's so true.
exactly.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
agree.
so I
I
was
mean,
questioning,
nothing.
like, I was questioning, when I hear that stuff, I'm like, does this person truly understand what we're trying to accomplish as far as movement goes in a match?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, nothing against. Trust me. Like I think we all work out to some extent and so forth. I mean, being in shape is great. I'm all for fitness. I'm all for being faster. All that's great. And I think technically it's going to help you, right? If you're faster, you're going to be
Hmm.
faster. But at the same time, like you're saying, and by the way, I'm not sure. Isolation. I'm not even sure is the right word for it, Brennan. I mean, I'm all for isolating. Isolating is great, but the kind of movement that we do in should be doing on a stage in USPSA is so vastly different from just running from one place to another quickly,
Yeah,
that the two are almost unrelated in a lot of ways.
yeah, I would agree
So
with that.
yeah, pretty interesting stuff. All right, man. I think we've not to beat a dead horse, but I think we've covered that one, or at least brought into it. I'm looking forward to all your comments. I'm not going to read about why we're stupid. Okay, so let's I think the next segment we're going to try out, guys, I'm excited about this, hearing from these guys, kind of a this week in shooting segment that I want to bring to the table, because I think what a lot of people struggle with, guys, is um being self-taught, right? And there's a lot of good instructors out there now, more than ever. There's a lot of good instructors out there, and there's so many good places for information. But what so many of the folks that hit me up, on a weekly basis and come to classes and so forth, struggle with, honestly, is self-assessment. um where am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And then when I identify weaknesses, how do I develop a training plan to actually work on that stuff? How do I get better, other than paying a bunch of money and burning a bunch of ammo to go to a class, which I'm sure all of us are pro classes and pro instructors here, right? It's what we do. There's value to that. But whenever I'm not doing that, and having someone else tell me what to do all the time, how do I actually develop training plans, and how do I work on stuff to get better? So an interesting way for us to do that, I think, is to come together and be like, hey, what are we working on? Like, what are your current weaknesses that you're working on? What are you trying to get better at? What kind of drills are you doing this week? What are you learning? What have you found that's interesting? So we're going to do it kind of a this week in shooting segment, guys. We're talking about some of that kind of stuff. We may talk about classes that we're doing as well, and matches that we're shooting, and maybe new gear that we got on occasion, since that's what everyone actually wants to hear about, I'm sure, and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I think this would be a fun segment. So what do you guys got? Anything recently y'all been doing that folks would find interesting?
Yeah, I've been playing with grip a lot. Dude, I'm always like playing with stuff, changing stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been doing a lot of bill drills, trying to like, more or less like free up the tension
Yeah.
in my hands.
Yeah.
I think it was Ben Stoker. I think it was Ben
Yeah.
who was talking about his like he still works on grip.
Yeah.
um, yeah, grip
It's
is like the
fascinating.
foundation for pretty much everything. So um, I still work on that quite a bit, and I'll be honest, I get frustrated with grip sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I want it to be perfect.
Yeah. I think folks will be surprised to hear that, right? I think a lot of folks, I almost hate the term fundamental because it almost like discounts some of the most important stuff in shooting that you never stop working on. People think of fundamental is like the basics, right? And on the one hand, like grip is a basic in the sense that it's the first thing you need to learn, essentially. But I gotta be honest, I've changed my grip recently as well. I now kind of have a way that I grip my gun in matches that is different from almost any other time. and
I'm anxious to hear it. Tell me how you're
Okay,
doing it.
so it's specifically because of Pro Grip. I feel like Pro Grip allows me to do things with the gun that I can't do without it.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
That's very fair.
So not to beat a dead horse and get too into the weeds here. Maybe folks will find this interesting. So there's essentially, I think, in my mind, I'm interested to hear your guys' take on it. Kind of 3 ways to add leverage to the gun in a way that significantly increases the amount of pressure you can put on it, other than just squeezing the heck out of it. Right? We've all heard I heard this terminology from Brandon Wright early on. He talks about the horseshoe grip. Where if I'm gripping a horseshoe with the opening at the bottom, as I grip the pistol and I try to open up the jaws of the horseshoe and leverage into the top where I'm squeezing, pulling apart with the pinkies and leveraging into the top. I did that a lot. I still do that some. You've got kind of the opposite of that, which is like the Frank Proctor deal, where he sort of has the horseshoe towards the top, squeezing the elbows together, really smashing in towards the bottom of the grip. And when you do that, the amount of pressure you can get into the pistol is phenomenal. I'm kind of doing a hybrid almost, I think, right now in matches that I've just kind of found myself doing when I have Pro Grip, and it's allowing me to do some pretty cool stuff, I feel like, where really I'm pulling apart with this hand, if you will, almost on the front of my grip, and just squeezing the back of my hands into the backstrap of the gun really, really hard. But if my hands are sweaty at all on a hot day in the summer and I don't have Pro Grip or whatever, my fingers just start, pulling apart my grip right there. But if I really code it in there on matches, man, it allows me to do some pretty cool stuff. So anyway, point of that being, I don't think you should ever stop experimenting with grip. And how can we do better and figure out different things?
Dude, exploration of topics is how you create ownership of things.
Yeah,
it really is.
We have a guest.
Yeah, like her robe.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, so
Yeah,
very
they
cool.
can see you.
Brennan, how about you, man? You got anything?
Not right now, no.
Yeah. So for anybody who maybe follows me or knows me personally, knows that I'm a pistol shooter and I tolerate rifles. However, with working at Vortex now, obviously, we make a lot of rifle optics and red dots and things, and so we offer a lot of rifle classes, of course. And so it's been
fair to say
been
y'all dabble,
for me
dabble
to,
a little bit in those things.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's been good for me to kind of brush up on my rifle and break that out a lot more than I was used to. So one of the things, like for me, so for some context, for those of you who don't know, I've only been shooting since January of 2019.
Yeah.
So not long. And it's just dove headfirst into pistol and really just tried to see what I could do to master pistol. Didn't give a whole lot of time to rifle. And one of the things that I noticed when I started diving into rifle was, shooting rifles fast and up close is very similar to shooting pistols fast and up close, except it's a little bit easier because that dot does not go so far, right? And so it's a little bit easier to keep that dot where I want it. So I was kind of like, when I first picked up rifles, I was like, man, this is this is pretty easy, and it's also kind of a little boring, so I'm going to go back to pistols. What I'm getting the chance to do now is kind of stretch my capabilities a little bit, and also stretch the capabilities of what we know rifles are good at, right? Which is being able to shoot more accurately and faster and at longer ranges. So honestly, it's super boring, but this week I spent some time just on the 100-yard range and just shooting, and proned out, and was working on my prone position, working on my kneeling positions, and figuring out, man, just how do I stabilize this gun in a really consistent way so that I get a consistent dot pattern, so I can fire very consistently. And so it's super boring stuff, but that's what I spent my week working on, a couple of days this week, and saw some really big improvements. I went from shooting like 15 seconds, shooting maybe like standing to prone, like something like in the 80s on a B8, to 100 7x, 100 8x at 100. Right. So I started figuring some things out, and it was just a matter of giving it some time, but also knowing how to train on one discipline, pistol, right? Though that carries over to being able to figure out how to train with another platform. So I think that's pretty cool. So I just spent some time working on the 100-yard range this week, and it was pretty
it's
cool.
fascinating. I feel like that only goes the one way though. You know what I mean? Like,
I think so too.
yeah, I know a lot. I know very few, if
Yeah,
any, pistol shooters,
that's
like
right.
high level pistol shooters that pick up a rifle and just look like they're lost, right? But I know a
Right.
lot of good rifle shooters that can't shoot a pistol at all.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree with
funny,
that, man.
funny how that
I
works.
think the pistol has a lot more transferable skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
just accuracy focused, and then again, once I figured out what I needed to do to shoot hundreds with like 5x or better,
Yeah.
I started just trying to do it faster.
Yeah.
So
There it is. There it is, right? Yeah, it was cool, man. I saw some of your stories you posted this week, and it's funny you posted the one B8, and I assumed it was 50 when you from 50 yards when you posted, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And then you came back later, you clarified, you're like, no, guys, it was from the 100, and I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty good.
yeah, someone messaged me. He was like, "What distance?" I was like, 100. He was like, "Holy shit, dude!" I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I'm sorry. I should have clarified
yeah,
that."
yeah. It matters a little bit, for sure.
Uh,
But yeah, that's cool. That's cool stuff, man. Cool stuff. I've in the competition space, I've been playing around with. Honestly, the mental game has been like a huge focus for me over the past weeks and months, and I've really started looking. I think now part of this is just because the journey you go through. Like for me, um, making masterclass was all about speed. Essentially, this is what I kind of tell newer shooters as well. I'm like, you can run with the big dog masterclass guys at your local shooting 30 and 40% Charlies. Like you really can if you're fast. Like it's all about getting it done as fast as possible. Then all of a sudden you get up into that GM kind of neck of the woods and you start trying to like win majors and stuff, and that stuff it doesn't fly anymore, you know. And a lot of times, what I found is, again, like we were saying in the beginning, it's not about slowing down. I can slow down and shoot just as many Charlies. Believe me, I can do it. It's not that. It's the important stuff like visual discipline, forcing yourself to really see that spot on the target every single time. Forcing yourself to treat the trigger appropriately on targets that deserve respect, and it's about calling your shots, and it's about all the things that we all know how to do, and just disciplining yourself to do that every time. And sometimes when you do it, it's just as fast, right? It didn't really take any more time. It just took more intentionality, and it took more discipline, and it took more purpose. But it was interesting. So back in the day when I first started, getting good at USPSA, I found myself shooting some of my better scores if I went in and almost like shot angry. It was just all about tearing that thing up, man. You know what I'm saying? Like just going after it. And it's now a very, very different mindset. The thing that I found recently that's really interesting is I've changed my visualization process a little bit. I'm basically on some of my recent matches not doing full speed visualization. I'm doing it in like slow motion. Especially the shooting part. Like I'll still visualize myself being very aggressive on the movement. And then, for me as a hoser, again, I think the mental stuff is very personal. I don't think there's any one way that applies to everybody. But, I've found it pretty interesting in the visualization, parts, and even, my last kind of visual run through before I actually run the stage. I'm just kind of picture myself doing the shooting part, like in slow motion, literally. And then I just go and let it happen. And what's interesting is, a lot of time when I've been doing this sometimes recently and been successful at it, it feels slow when I'm shooting the stage. At least the shooting part does. And then you go back and watch it, and you compare your splits on the time chart to the next guy, and you're like, holy crap! Like, I just shot 31 alphas on the stage, and I did it faster than anyone else. Like, the speed, again, the speed of it and the accuracy weren't really related. They seem directly opposing to each other. But it was just about actually focusing on the right things and disciplining yourself to look for the right things and see what you need to see on every shot and so forth. It's been pretty interesting. But that's just some hoser stuff for you guys. I don't know if you guys have the same issues I do or not.
I find that super interesting that you visualize it in slow-mo.
Yeah, that's new.
And
it's
I
something
think
I'm trying out lately, but
I think what's neat about that is, like, because I was going to ask you, but you already said that when you shot it, you felt like you were going slow, but then you watched the video and you're going fast. So
right.
that answered my question. I think that visualizing it in slow-mo just made you pay attention to the things that you need to pay attention to, and you don't need to go fast because you already are fast.
Right.
Like my homie says.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. That's really
it,
cool.
Man.
I may try that too.
Yeah, thinking about shooting fast is a bad idea. Because I'm gonna shoot it fast. I'm gonna shoot it fast. But yeah, no, that's the thing. For me as someone who tends to be a hoser, all of the visual attention, all of the mental attention has got to be on seeing what I need to see in that visual discipline. And then, like I said, I'm not going to sit there and over confirm. That's just not in my nature. But if I can force myself to wait for what it is that I need, the rest will come. And that's pretty cool. But some folks do focus, struggle on the throttle control side of things, where it's like, hey, you got to separate the things. The movement can still be just as aggressive, right? And the transitions can still be just as aggressive, but it's just the noisy part. Sometimes you need to chill and kind of relax on a little bit. But it's sometimes challenging to keep the aggression up everywhere else.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that, because when I try to go fast on a stage, what it kind of reminds me of is like playing catch with a dog, right? With a ball, with a freaking labradoodle.
Yeah.
And like you throw the ball and it accidentally bounces out in the traffic, and he's like, "That's all right, I'll go get it," and just completely crashes, right? That's how I feel like when I go fast. Like in the beginning, I'm like, "This is going great," and then the visual discipline slips away, and then you start missing stuff, and then it's just a complete damn dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's funny. I was saying it's a similar thought to that. I was having a discussion with Juansik last week. I'm in the side note, I'm in the practical shooting training group that Ben and Juansik, Kim, and Joel Park are doing. They're getting some coaching from those guys. It's actually been super beneficial to have people that know what they're talking about look at your videos and our internet trolls and give you feedback. But I was telling him, because I've noticed that it's kind of a trend in myself. Sometimes it's like, if there's an array, like a falling steel array where there's like 6 pieces of steel, it's like those each successive hit is like a cue to my brain going, oh, you can go faster. You're not missing stuff. You can just keep going. And it's like, sure enough, you get to the last, you hit like 5 in a row, and you get to the last piece of steel, and you're like, miss, hit. You're like, oh, what? Why didn't I just keep doing the same thing, all the way through? But yeah, it's a constant battle for sure to discipline yourself to do what you gotta do.
I rolled up to my first match, right, at so Vortex hosts a match, right? We host a match at a range, and so we all try to shoot it and RO it and things like that, and all those things, right? So I show up, and this is what maybe my second week on the job, and I'm thinking, okay, this is different. I've never been paid to shoot a match before, so that's interesting. Yeah, you would think so. And then everybody that I knew in Wisconsin, which is like 6 people, they all showed up and they all squatted with me. And so they're all like, "Oh yeah, it'd be awesome to finally shoot a match with you, Brennan. Like this is really cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, guys, this is really cool." And we start off, and it's a classifier, and I had rehearsed that classifier over and over and over and over, and I knew exactly how I needed to shoot it, and I knew exactly what my dot needed to look like on every dang target. And I go up to shoot it, and I shoot the first 3. It was 1903. Shoot the first 3. I move over, and I literally thought to myself, "Dude, you are going way too slow. There's no way you're going to score better than a 90." Peeked out around the other the other wall, and just and just was like, "I've got to blaze these down." And lots of things went to shit. And so then I go to my next stage, and I'm like, "All right, you know what? That was a total dumpster fire. I'm just gonna shoot my thing now." And I was trying to be really conservative, and then I sped it up, and I was just, my mental game was off. So this next one, you know what? I'm just gonna shoot it fast, like I like to do. And that was also not a good idea. And it took me until probably like the 3rd stage or the 4th stage to be like, "Dude, just see your dang dot on the target and pull the trigger." Like, you do not need to try to learn how to make up some sort of speed during this match right now. You can't. It's impossible, right? So just like do your thing that you know how to do every time, and don't try to freaking make something up. But yeah, I run into the same thing, man. If I don't slow my vision to a point where I'm paying attention to every single thing that I'm doing, it's a dumpster fire, man. It's a dumpster fire.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, vision's so underrated. It really
Extremely.
is. It's really crazy. And it's crazy how when you say that, certain people, they just look at you like a calf at a new gate. Like, what's your biggest weakness? What are you working right now? I'm like, "Man, I just need to see stuff better." And they're like, "What?
Like, need glasses, bro?" Like, no.
And it's like, man, you just, at a certain point, the holding the gun and pulling the trigger and all that kind of stuff, it almost gets kind of boring at a certain point. You know what I mean? It's like that stuff is all, it is what it is. And, man, it's a lot about that other stuff, but pretty interesting. All right. Got a few minutes left. Might as well answer a couple of questions. I know all of us get, all the questions from the interwebs. Mostly the same questions. It feels like sometimes over and over again. We were joking about that a little bit before we got started. But guys, you can, if you guys have questions, those of you that are listening that want to submit them, maybe we'll have a way to do it directly at some point. For now, if you can just send them to any of us, and if they're interesting and might be helpful for other people, we might answer them on here. But I think we can cherry pick a couple that are interesting. Mine that I got actually this weekend at a class that I was kind of interested specifically to hear what Nick and Brennan had to say about it before I spoil all of my opinions on it. It has to do with red dot reticles in general, but specifically I think for pistol red dots. Dot sizes are kind of boring, but specifically things like the circle dot and maybe the good old loophole triangle and the different options that are out there. And if there's any value to those, if we should be using those, or should we just stick with the plain old red or green dot? What are our thoughts, guys? What do we think?
So I've explored the circle dot a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like I said before, I try to explore a lot because exploring things give you ownership, right? And you have a better understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
What I loved the circle dot for quite a while. What I found is on my transitions, like trying to transition from target to target, I would see that red on the circle rather than the center dot and press the trigger. And I'm like, why am I shooting Charlies?
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of the circle, and I am no longer doing that. I'm driving straight to the center. For me, trying to go fast, like shooting a B8, it was perfect, right? Because that thing centers around a B8, the circle does. And dude, like I was shooting, I think I actually got it on video. I shot like a 96 and like a 565 or something, from 25 yards. But I think when you start transitioning from target to target, that thing gets really, really hard. And that's not something that I've experienced with a rifle before. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's different. It's almost like I don't mind it on a rifle, but on a pistol, for some odd reason, that it was just too much for me to look at. So I've completely gotten rid of the circle, and I only run the dot. I wish the dot was bigger, but it's not.
Yeah. So thoughts. I have a thought on that before I dive in it. But I think to me the big difference between a rifle and a pistol is partially the technology, right? So when you think about an EOTech or something, you've got a holographic sight where no matter how far away you're looking at that thing, it's the same size. Which is typically
Right.
a lot of times is not the case with your your Holler Suns and your other things on your pistol. And I think relatively the circle tends to be, regardless of what size they quote the ring is, it tends to be smaller by the time you punch your arms out and look at it versus a rifle. Has that been your experience as well?
I would say so. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For
Which
sure.
I think is part of it, right? It makes it look a lot busier, and it's a lot harder to track just the dot. I feel like versus the circle. I don't know if that's all of it, but and the pistol just bounces around more than a rifle, right? So it's can be maybe a little bit more difficult to track there too. But yeah, interesting comparisons there. But yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you what you were saying. Did you have anything else on
No, no
that?
worries.
Okay, Brennan,
No, no.
anything?
I just wish
No.
I would wish the dot was bigger. That's it.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so I would say a pretty similar experience, honestly, as Nick. Up until just a few weeks ago, I exclusively ran Holston on my carry pistols,
Yeah.
the 507C, and yeah, so I also wanted to try the circle dot. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I think it's cool. I think it's cool that they have the technology to run multiple reticles, and I'm just gonna see how this is. I found a very few uses where I felt like I liked it, or I was happy with it.
Yeah.
One was for me, just and this might just be for my eyes, but when I turn it down really low and was looking through nods, it showed up a little bit better than just the dot for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was less bloom, and it just looked a little bit nicer. Did I shoot under nods very often? Absolutely not. Do I now? Yeah, a little bit more. But uh, that seemed like a niche use case, and for most people, not something that would be applicable at all. I did find that obviously I was finding that circle really early
Mm-hmm.
on presentations and things like that. But the problem is like it doesn't matter if I found the circle early. Like I can't shoot. I couldn't really shoot off of like the edge of the circle, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
still had to find the center of the circle. I still had to find the dot in the middle, and so I didn't feel like that was helpful. And a lot of people say that could be really helpful for beginner shooters who are maybe have a problem with fishing for the dot. And my answer to that is that they're not learning how to present the gun correctly.
Yep.
I think if you learn how to present the gun correctly, there's really that really takes that part out of it. I know that Nick teaches that. I know that you teach that because I've trained under both of you guys, and that's absolutely my experience as well. The only time that I really felt like it really shone was I did a 2-day low light class with Brian Valise, and
Mm-hmm.
so obviously all of it was white light, and when I turned that dot down, I felt like I was able to transition from kind of like an ambient lighting condition where I may or may not need that white light, or to using my weapon mounted light versus a handheld light a little bit better without having so much bloom.
Hmm.
That was really the only thing. Now, when I started doing like like the kind of pistol shooting that I do, right, that we do, like fast shooting,
Yeah.
I had the same experience as Nick. Transitions were weird because I was seeing red too early, and then even just tracking recoil up and down for anything that's maybe a little bit maybe a touch more confirmation than we would have at maybe like 5 yards. Maybe we're talking like 10 or 15 yards. It was really difficult to shoot off of kind of the flash.
Yeah.
Right. I felt like there was way too much red.
Yeah.
Right. And I had red covering outside of the A zone, bordering on the C zone, just like up and down. And there was no way for me to settle that paintbrush effect into the A. And so when I figured that out, I was like, yeah, no, this is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my thoughts line up very much with what you guys. I was interested to see if anybody liked the circle dot, but my thoughts line up pretty much the same. You know, excuse me. You know, I think there's a couple prevailing principles that folks have about dots that, in my opinion, tend to be wrong. One of which is that, like, in general, you should be able to quote unquote pick up a bigger dot faster. And in my mind, what makes the dot stand out to the eye is significantly less about the size of it and more about the brightness of it, right? Which now typically with our red dot optics, when they get bright, they get bigger as well. But it's more about, you know, the brightness. If I have a, you know, 1 MOA dot on 10, I'm probably going to see that a lot easier than an 8 MOA dot on 5, right? Like it's primarily about how bright is this thing, how much contrast am I getting between the background and my eye. I like what you guys both mentioned, reacting to color, which I think is a huge part of it, right? Setting aside like a niche use case where you're like you guys were both saying, shooting, you know, B8s, where some guys like a circle only, you know, for like if they're super into B8 to 25 or whatever, and that kind of like, you know, getting super gamer on that kind of stuff, you know,
Gross.
at a you know, 7-yard open target, right? Like when I'm drawing to a 7-yard open target, like I'm not seeing a round dot on the target for the first shot, right? It's like you're reacting to the color of the dot being there inside of the window, because at 7 yards, I mean, the window is essentially the A zone. Like, and so if it's in there, you're getting A zone hits, right? Not necessarily the case if you got a big circle dot and you're catching the edge of that thing. The other big issue that I have with the circle dot is just is it makes target focus, I feel like, even more difficult, because, you know, it's hard enough for some folks. A lot of folks end up looking at their dot, especially when they're shooting fast, and it's hard enough, you know, if I'm looking at the spot on the target and my dot's right there and I pull the trigger and the dot lifts, to not let my eyes follow that dot when it lifts up. But it's even harder if there's more dot underneath here that's coming up through my vision now, to not let your eyes track that thing that's coming up through your sight picture. And so it's super easy to start tracking the dot instead of looking at the target. So I feel like the attraction to the circle dot, especially with pistols, is a little bit from a misunderstanding of how dots are supposed to work, especially at speed shooting, you know, at you know, closer distances and easier targets and so forth. So yeah, I'm not a fan either. Really not a fan of anything other than just the dot. I don't like the circle. We didn't talk about the diamonds at all, but I don't really like those either. Again, because
I don't think anyone uses those anymore. And if they do, they would tell you to slow down and get your hits.
Hey, your boy Parker Mountain gave me one to shoot at ORID. I had to give him a hard time about that.
Every time I see him with that stupid thing, I'm like, why do we still have this, Jared?
That's great, man. But
you need to just conveniently find that thing broken one day. Be like, dude, this thing's broken, man. Oh well.
But yeah, I think when you understand the, you know, again, when if you're doing anything other than bullseye shooting, you know, it's not about, you don't want a reticle that's designed for, hey man, I have to sit here and I have to make sure it's like lined up with my target. That's not what it's about. It's about tracking the dot in motion and timing shots and that kind of stuff, which I feel like the circle really works the best for.
You touched on night vision a little bit with the circle dot. I would absolutely agree with that. I had the hardest time with a hollow sun with a circle dot being accurate with nods on. And I think it's because it's a small window and people go, well, it's just a dot floating around. Well, it's kind of not, right? Because with nods on, you can see the outline of that thing. It's hard to see through that little window with all of that stuff going on. And so, like, if you're shooting B8s with nods on, dude, it is a complete struggle. with that circle dot.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not a big nods guy, but I will say that the SRO, in my experience, under nods is just like it's just a pleasure. You know, it really is.
It's nirvana.
Yeah. Sorry, Brennan. I don't mean to be stepping on any toes or anything, but yeah, good times. Okay. You guys got any other interesting questions that folks
Unbelievable.
would be good for folks to hear about?
Unbelievable.
There might be a lot of that going on.
Yeah, it's not a bad point. Not a bad point.
That's fine. I can take it.
What's the word, guys? You guys got any interesting questions recently?
Where do we see these questions?
I'm just talking about like just from the gram that people are like sending you, or from
Oh,
classes,
I
or
thought you
whatever.
meant people were writing
No,
questions. I was
no, I'm
like,
just
I
saying,
don't
like,
see any questions coming.
cherry pick something from the last couple weeks, week or two. Someone's asked you that would be good for people to hear about.
So I've got a good question.
Okay.
I've got a good question, and I think both of you guys can speak to this, maybe even a little bit better than I can. I have my own opinions, but they're also still kind of being formed as I gain more experience. So I have had maybe half a dozen people in the last week or so ask me with LPVOs, right, on a do-all rifle, which is another kind of whole thing in and of itself, right? And we've had those discussions. I've had those discussions with people. Why people are so obsessed about a do-all rifle, but with a do-all rifle, where something they want to shoot from 0 to, let's say, 400 yards. All right. What glass they should get to be able to do that, do all those things. And mainly they're trying to figure out, do I want something like a 1 to 4, 1 to 6, or maybe like 1 to 8 or 1 to 10, right? They're trying to figure out what kind of magnification they might need for that. I have my own opinions on that, and like I said, they're also kind of still being formed. What are your guys' kind of thoughts on that, as far as having to try to fit it into, when we say dual rifle, let's say this guy wants to be able to shoot from 0 to 400 and he's only got one gun. All right. And let's assume it's capable of hitting to 400.
Well, not to just stroke Vortex's back or anything, since you guys are here, but I mean, man, it's like when you're asking how much magnification do I need, it's like, man, with the quality glasses out there right now, like if you look at like the 1 to 10 or whatever, it's like, man, you're not giving anything up in order to get that 10, really. You know what I mean? It's just like such a solid optic. I have a hard time saying, man, you don't need that. It's just like, man, it's such a good piece of glass for all the things it feels like. But I feel like Nick's probably really the LVPO expert. I should let him go first here. But
I'm gonna try to keep it short because I know y'all don't want to hear me yak about this for an hour.
Yeah.
But so I've come to like basically 2 LPVOs, right? And that's the K16i from Collins,
Yep.
and the Vortex 1 to 10. The Vortex 1 to 10 for me is a very, very good option for, like, I would say 700 yards and in. Okay. And the reason being is because, number one, obviously you have more magnification. Number two, the reticle is more conducive to those long range or longer ranges than like the K16i or even like the Vortex Razor 1 to 6.
Yeah.
Because it has numbers next to it, right? That's very, very important. And it's first focal plane. And so I feel like that 1 to 10 is a wonderful 700 yard in setup. Do I need that for 400? So my K16i, right, on my 12.5, I have to hold 2 mils at 400 yards. That 2 mils is right at the bottom of that circle. So the K16i does not have any sort of numbers in it, which I don't like, it's kind of why I would not recommend that as something that you're going to use beyond, say, 400 or 500 yards. But that thing on my 12.5, I would say, is nirvana for what I do with that 12.5. My 1 to 10 Vortex with the MRAD reticle on my 14.5 is perfect for what I do with that particular gun. So I think it has to do with what you want to do with the gun. Not so much like how much like
Yeah.
what kind of magnification do I need, right? And I get asked a lot, like, what are the budget options, right? And people always, I'm sorry, Brennan, people bring up the Strike
Strike
Eagle,
Eagle.
right?
I don't make them, man. I just
So
work for them. So
I know, I
I'm my
get
way.
it. And dude, if you went out in my garage, you would see like Vortex boxes everywhere, right? Like I have two 1 to 10s. I have the freaking Razor spotting scope. I have a Vortex tripod. Like I love the Vortex, but like there's not that many good budget options, guys. There just isn't, right? The Vortex
I definitely
PST
agree.
is not the answer. The Strike Eagle is definitely not the answer. So I think if you want to spend, I think if you're going to get into the LPVO game, right, because you want to shoot out to say 300 to 400 yards and actually see what you're hitting, right, because that's an important part of this. A lot of people go, well, I can see the target with my red dot. And it's like, that's another conversation, right? But I think the cheapest option you should go is probably that Razor 1 to 6. And a lot of the times you could find that thing used for like $800-900. So
Yep. I got one of those too. Super great. Especially, for a lot of folks, realistically too, like you were just saying, LVPOs are great not only for extending distance, but shooting tiny stuff up close, right? And that's where something like the 1 to 6 is phenomenal. And even, I don't know what your thoughts, Nick, but even, if you're trying to shoot tiny stuff up close, I mean, I've been pretty impressed with the Viper as well. It's okay, right? So
Yeah.
there's but you don't like I'm like you. I would almost rather have a dot than like something in the primary arms Strike Eagle type neck of the woods. I'll
I would
just
definitely rather
oh
have
yeah,
a dot and a magnifier than a cheap LPVO for sure.
yeah,
It's
dude.
interesting.
Where the sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Where the cheap LPVOs start to shit the bed is beyond 100 yards, right? And the glass, nothing focuses, right? I recently did a class at the Winter Paradise Summit with Joe Farewell and Donovan Moore, and I did the scoped carbine portion of the class, and a couple people have brought the Vortex PST. The is that a Viper, Brennan?
The Viper.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so like they were like, "How does this thing focus? Like it looks great up to 100 yards, and then past 2, 3, 4, 5, like it is all blurry." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"You're just gonna have to play with the freaking diopter the whole time."
Yep.
The glass is just not up to snuff on that thing. It's a decent like 100 yard and in option, but I don't think past that it's very good.
I mean, yeah. So straight up, we tell people there's always people who want to spend the least amount of money possible, and they don't really care about anything other than the number of dollars leaving their
Mm-hmm.
wallet, right? And so that's literally why Vortex makes a lot of lower end stuff, is because it scratches that itch for people. They wanted a dot, they wanted a scope, and they bought it, and now they feel good about themselves, and they don't shoot. All right. So, and then the serious shooters don't really use anything less than the Razor line, from my opinion, and from my experience. It was interesting today. We actually got to sit down with some of the folks from Rifle Scope Repair, and they got to show us kind of the inner workings of a scope, which I had never seen before, and a lot of our guys hadn't seen
Super cool.
before, and it's amazing. And they were also showing us the differences between like the Strike Fires and the Vipers and the Razors, and the differences in how they're built. And uh, it's they're not even built anywhere close to the same quality or the same durability or anything like that. And so I think that's just something that people need to understand,
Mm-hmm.
is that you can, just the name behind something does not necessarily mean that it's equal of everything they offer, or equal with a top of the line product that someone else offers, and dollars don't necessarily translate all the time to exactly what you think you're getting, or what you think you should be getting. But I totally agree. with that assessment. What I told that guy, as far as kind of that do all, I said, look, man, I think all you need from what you're telling me, if all you really want to do is shoot 400 and in, and primarily even closer, I think all you need is the 1-6. If you have the capability to go farther than 400 yards, and you've got the money, I would get the 1-10. Right? It's going to do everything the 1-6 can, with a little bit more capability. Well, actually, a lot more capability. But people, it's interesting, and that's probably going to be a topic for another podcast, right? But people always wanting to get the lowest common denominator gear training, whatever it is, and then expect to perform at the highest common denominator, and I think that's a misconception, but that's probably another
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that you can spend not a whole lot of money on, and it's pretty damn decent.
Sure.
Scopes are not one of them. Night vision is not one of them, right? If you want to get into any of those, like, just save, man. Like, that's the only advice. I get asked a lot about night vision stuff. Like, what's the cheapest? I'm like, dude, trust me, you are wasting your money spending $1,500 on a set of PVS 14s with Russian tubes, because you're not going to be able to see, right? Freaking save that 1,500, like, save up another year and buy the good stuff, right? I wish people would do that more, because in the end, man, they're just going to end up with a box full of shit that they're not going to use, and they're going to end up spending more money on the thing that they should have bought to begin with.
That's it.
And people, for some reason, I feel like they doubt when they ask somebody, like, somebody maybe an instructor or somebody in the industry, hey man, what's your recommendation on this? And you tell them, hey man, I recommend X, Y, and Z. And they're like, yeah, but what about A, B, and C? Right? It's like, well, I didn't recommend that for a reason. And like, maybe I started with that and it didn't work. Or it didn't work past a certain skill level or a certain capability that I needed to have, and so that's why I don't recommend that anymore. And people seem to maybe, I don't know, maybe. So sometimes I wonder why they ask, and I think it's maybe more for validation than for advice. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that mindset has always been fascinating to me. But you're so right. It's for so long. I think in so many segments, it really was. You get what you pay for. In a lot of areas, but it's fascinating how a lot of those segments are getting shaken up now. I feel like even the Razor is a fantastic example of a scope that is significantly cheaper than a lot of its competition that are not as good as it is in a lot of ways. I know we all run some hollow sun pistol optics over the years that are as of equal or greater quality than optics that cost a whole lot more, right? So it's definitely cool to see some of those products coming on the market that do continue to save you money. But even with products like that on the market, there's always the guy that wants to buy the Swamp Fox or the Burris or whatever it is, because even that the good quality cheap stuff is just is not enough. And I'm definitely not making fun of folks at all that are on a budget or whatever. But man, it's just like if you buy a good quality optic, you're gonna have that thing forever. At this point, the optics that are on the market are not going obsolete. Like, they are what they are. If you've got an Aimpoint Pro from 15 years ago, like, if you're upgrading that thing, it's for the gram, right? Like, that thing is still fine, right? And that's I think
Dude, I
where
still run an M2.
yeah. So if you buy a good Hollow Sun or whatever it is right now, like, yeah, you're gonna have that thing forever.
Yep,
And so it's like, man,
agreed.
wait another 6 months or whatever, and make a good choice, and I think you'll be a lot better off. But anyway,
I think
guys,
what
yep,
I
go
think
ahead.
what sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you're good, man.
I think what people have to realize, especially with scopes and things like night vision and stuff, is technology costs money,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like if you wanted to buy a really fast car, if you bought a Honda Civic and put a muffler and a spoiler on it, that doesn't make it a Ferrari, right?
So true.
Because technology and money went into that Ferrari to make that damn thing fast, right? The Honda Civic might look really cool and fast with the muffler and the spoiler on it, but it damn sure ain't as fast as that Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
Not
And
that there's anything wrong with the Honda Civic for anyone listening. I
side
used to
note,
drive one, so.
you were talking about driving F1 cars earlier. If you want to be an F1 race driver, contrary to what some folks on the internet would have you believe, going out and learning how to drive a Civic is not necessarily going to get you there. You don't have
Yeah.
to start with the crappy stuff. That's not like a rite of passage to the good stuff. You can just start with the good stuff and learn how to shoot, and that's fine. That's fine. All right, guys. Before we get in too much trouble, I think we're about out of time for tonight. That was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you're finding us on the SpecTrain YouTube channel and don't know these guys, all their info will be down below. Please reach out, follow these guys, go take a class with them if they're in your area or you're nearby or whatever. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon on the next episode. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks.